In January of 1919, in a ballroom at the Alexandria Hotel in Los Angeles, Charlie Chaplin stood in front of a room of film executives and asked them for more money to make his pictures. They said no. Now, let's understand who was asking. Chaplin at that moment was, by most accounts, the most famous human being on the planet. He was 30 years old. He had already signed a contract worth $1 million. One of the first $1 million deals in the history of the movie business. If anyone alive had leverage in that room, it was him. They still said no. 3 weeks later, on February the 5th, Chaplin and 3 others walked into a lawyer's office and signed papers for a company of their own. They called it United Artists. It was the first Hollywood studio owned by the people who actually made the films. And it lasted, in one form or another, for the better part of a century. 36 years after that, Chaplin sold his entire share of it for $1.1 million, right before it became the biggest film distributor in the world. This is a money story. Let's get into it. The ladder. To understand why a man that powerful had to build his own company, let's start with how fast he climbed. Chaplin arrived at Keystone in 1913 on a contract worth $150 a week. Good money for a young vaudeville performer out of London. Nothing extraordinary. Within about a year, audiences had decided otherwise. In 1915, the Essanay company offered him $1,250 a week, plus a $10,000 signing bonus, roughly 8 times what he'd been making. The following year it happened again, and this time the number stopped being a salary and started being news. Mutual offered him $10,000 a week, plus $150,000 to sign. Across 1916, the contract was reported to be worth $670,000. $670,000 in 1916. That made a 26-year-old comedian the highest-paid entertainer in the world, and one of the highest-paid people in the United States of any kind. The head of Mutual said afterward that more newspaper space had been devoted to that salary than to anything except the war in Europe. Mutual built him his own studio to work in and put out publicity photographs of his paychecks. Then, in 1917, he signed with First National. $1 million for 8 films. Look at that ladder, $150 a week to $1 million in 4 years. By any measure, Chaplin had won the salary negotiation completely. No one was left to out-earn. Which raises the obvious question. If you've already won that game, why on earth would you quit it? What the salary couldn't buy. A salary, however enormous, only buys you one thing. It buys you payment for work you have already agreed to do, on terms somebody else controls. Here's how the movie business worked then. A handful of distributors decided which films reached which theaters. The most powerful of them practiced something called block booking. If a theater wanted the one picture everybody wanted to see, it had to buy the entire year's output, dozens of films, regardless of quality. The distributor set the terms. Everyone else took them. And that pressure produced something worth noticing, because that's where Chaplin got the idea. First National, the company that had just paid him $1 million, had not started as a studio at all. It began as 26 theater owners banding together in 1917 to buy and distribute films themselves, rather than accept the terms they were being handed. Within a year, 600 theaters had joined. They had gone from being customers to owning the pipeline, and it worked so well that they started making their own pictures. So Chaplin had a live demonstration in front of him. He had watched exhibitors escape the squeeze by building their own distribution, and then he had gone to work for them and discovered they behaved exactly like the people they'd escaped from, which is what that room at the Alexandria Hotel was about. A rumor was also going around Hollywood that the 2 biggest distributors were about to merge. If that happened, filmmakers would negotiate with 1 buyer instead of 2. That was the moment. Not the refusal itself. the realization that no salary, at any number, would ever change. Who decided? The company built by the stars. On February the 5th, 1919, 4 people incorporated United Artists: Chaplin, Mary Pickford, her future husband Douglas Fairbanks, and the director D.W. Griffith. Between them, they represented most of the drawing power in American cinema. The structure is the part that matters the most, and it's elegant. United Artists was not a studio in the usual sense. It didn't employ them or tell them what to make. It was a distributor, a company that existed to carry finished films to theaters. Each of the 4 kept complete control over their own productions, made whatever they wanted at their own expense, and handed the finished picture to a distribution company they collectively owned. The founders divided the stock equally. Reports of the exact split vary a little, but the principle is undisputed. The people making the films owned the company that sold them. Think about what that changes. Under the old arrangement, Chaplin was paid a salary for a picture, and the distributor kept whatever it earned beyond that. Now, he carried the production cost himself and kept the upside. If a film did modestly, that was his problem. If a film was a phenomenon, that was his money. His films were phenomena: The Kid, The Gold Rush, City Lights, Modern Times. In his autobiography, Chaplin noted that United Artists carried debt early on, and that the release of The Gold Rush wiped it out. The industry called it the company built by the stars. It was genuinely new, and it is the direct ancestor of every actor-owned production company operating today. Selling at the bottom. Now, the part almost nobody talks about. By the late 1940s, United Artists was in serious trouble. Griffith was gone, Fairbanks was gone, and the whole industry was about to be hit by television. In the mid-1950s, American cinema attendance fell to its lowest level since the early 1920s. 2 lawyers, Arthur Krim and Robert Benjamin, came to Chaplin and Pickford, by then the only 2 shareholders left, with a proposal. Let us run the company. We'll pay nothing at all for control. And if it turns a profit in any one of our first 3 years, we get to buy half of it at $1 a share. Half of United Artists came to 8,000 shares, $8,000, for half of a company Mary Pickford herself had valued at $5.5 million. They agreed. Krim and Benjamin turned a profit in year 1. In 1955, Chaplin sold his remaining share of United Artists for $1.1 million. He was living in Europe by then. The following year, Mary Pickford sold hers for $3 million. In 1957, 2 years after Chaplin sold, United Artists went public. By 1966, it was the largest producer and distributor of motion pictures in the world, and the following year, Transamerica acquired it. Chaplin had built the vehicle. He drove it for 36 years, and he stepped out of it at the exact moment the industry looked finished, for a sum that, next to what he'd earned in a single year at Mutual 4 decades earlier, was not a large number at all. The lesson. There are 2 lessons here. The first, on its own, is the version everybody tells. The first is the one Chaplin got right, and it is the biggest idea in this whole series. Owning the work is not the same as owning the pipeline. He had already maxed out what a performer could be paid, and it still left every decision that mattered with somebody else. The only way to change that was to change what stood between his films and the audience. So he built it. That instinct was right, decades early. And today's modern business runs on it. The second lesson is the one he got wrong, and it's the more useful one because most people are far more likely to repeat it. Ownership only pays if you hold it through the parts where it stops feeling valuable. In 1955, every visible signal said sell. Attendance was collapsing. Television was taking the audience. 2 of the 4 founders were dead. The company had nearly gone under a few years earlier. Selling was not stupid. It was the reasonable choice based on the evidence in front of him. And it was wrong. The thing he'd built was 11 years away from being the largest of its kind in the world. So the practical version, everyone focuses on getting ownership, and it's the easier half. Keeping it is harder, because keeping it means holding it through the years, when the asset looks like a mistake, and someone credible is offering you a clean exit. Chaplin asked a room full of executives for more money, and they told him no. That refusal was worth more to him than a yes would have been. It made him build something instead of negotiating for something. He didn't stay long enough to find out how much it was worth. What's next? If this one hit you, hit subscribe. Because next time, we're telling you about 4 people who did exactly what Chaplin did, and then did the one thing he didn't. They owned it together, in equal shares, and they held on to it for 50 years, through every reason to sell and every offer to take the money early. And when they finally did sell, the number wasn't in the millions. You don't want to miss it.